The Unlikely Innovators with Mike Commito and Steve Gravel. Presented by Cambrian R&D and the Center for Smart Mining.
Mike, if you think my hair is messed up today, it's not because I just jumped out of an airplane. It's because I need a haircut. But today we're actually joined by a former paratrooper, Daryl Adams, who is now the co-founder and president of RufDiamond Limited and used to be a paratrooper in the Canadian Armed Forces. I think it was a great chat, and it was a really fun look at his transition from the military to the business and equipment world.
Yeah, you could definitely see how I think he's been able to use his skills and his training that he developed, not only in the armed forces, but in the police service, to the way he orients his business and how detailed oriented he is. But also, I think even the way that he approaches, managing and caring for his people, I think that really came through as well. I think you and I needed to budget a lot longer to talk to Daryl, because we probably could have spent an entire episode just talking about, Band of Brothers, his time in the armed forces. I was going to go on a tangent about Currahee in Band of Brothers and running up the 3 miles up, 3 miles down, but I resisted that urge because we were already over time anyway, and he's got stuff to do. But no,
maybe a good chance for a beer sometime.
Yeah. So, but no, it was a great chat with Daryl today. I mean, I think rather than you and I talking about our great chat with Daryl, why don't we just let the listeners and the viewers go right to our conversation with Daryl Adams?
For sure. So Daryl Adams, co-founder and president of RufDiamond Limited, a Sudbury-based company that focuses on mobile solutions for remote locations. Daryl constantly seeks out new and innovative ways for clients to move people and equipment safe and effectively. He draws on, as we mentioned, his 12 years of experience in the Canadian Armed Forces, where he developed skills that focus on mission analysis, detail operational planning, peacekeeping, leadership, and crisis management, and where he deployed several amphibious vehicles in various settings in a number of different countries. We now give you Daryl Adams. All right, we're back, and we're joined by Daryl Adams, who is the founder, president, and CEO of RufDiamond Limited. Daryl, we always have really interesting folks on the show, and the name of the show is Unlikely Innovators. And I just think it's such an interesting story you have, starting with armed forces and now where you are now. So we kind of like to ask the question, like in the format of what did you want to be when you grow up? But I just would love to understand, obviously pre-armed forces, but from armed forces to RufDiamond seems like such an interesting tale also. So take that and do with it what you will.
Sure. So like a lot of people know about militaries, but a lot of people don't know in the military, there's upwards of 70, 80 plus trades in the military. And certain trades, your part of your training schema is to be a problem solver, think tank, work your way out of problems, whether it's, solving how to get into a structure, how to get out of a place, undetected. You just have to think your way through. And some of the things they teach in the military are to get away from if then into a when then. So you run contingencies, and when this happens, then we're doing that. So in the military, I served just in around 12 years in the Canadian Forces. And during that time, I completed 3 6-month tours in the Balkans, the former Republic of Yugoslavia. First tour was with the UN, 6 months, and the other 2 were NATO tours. But the entire time was always trying to do more with less, learning skills and abilities and honing the abilities on how to motivate people when there's no such thing as overtime. How do you get people to do what you need done, given we're sometimes 183 days away from home. Hot meals are rare. Mail sometimes gets delivered. So you try and focus on Maslow's hierarchy of needs and take care of people's safety. You want to be a competent leader. So the military really, I feel, took Daryl Adams and who was a little rough around the edges growing up, and the military brought me in, filtered me, polished me up, and sent me on my way. And loved the military. I would have stayed in. I loved every second of it. But when I went on my 3rd tour to the Balkans, I left when my wife was 8 months pregnant. So, and that was, if you can appreciate, is December 1999. and it was the mission operation name was Operation Kinetic, and good name because we were. It was a few weeks before Y2K,
Yeah.
so we didn't know what was going to happen in the world. I was reassured by the military. Your family's going to be fine. Stay focused on the mission. So my wife is 8 months pregnant, Y2K looming 2 weeks away, and I'm on an aircraft heading over to Yugoslavia for the third time. So needless to say, once I was there, did my mission test. When I came back, I said, I'm going to look for something a little bit similar, but geographically based where I can come home at least once a day.
Yeah.
So that kind of military, I owe just about everything I have into business from the military. And I look at a lot of it was based on the leaders I saw, both non-commissioned members and the officers who were like the commissioned officers who were more strategic thinkers. And I like to model the way that they led by.
That's I think you appreciate the commute that you have when you realize that, the commute for you was getting on an airplane and going over for your third tour. Well, I think of Y2K at that time. I've shared the story on the podcast, so I won't belabor it, but my dad was the manager of the store, Sears store in Timmins at the time. And I guess Sears Canada had all of its managers in the stores on the night of New Year's Eve because they thought, I don't know what they would have done if something happened, but all these guys and gals spent New Year's Eve in the stores in case the electronics failed. And I don't know what my dad was going to do, but that's where he was that night. And we were with him actually. So.
Yeah. I think back to that night, there's always little highlights of those tours, and I remember that night vaguely because we were in comms with Australia. So we had a satellite uplink with the U.S. Armed Forces, and we were tracking what was happening to them. And I remember we were patrolling. We were at 100% stand to. So there was every able-bodied person out. And I remember one of our commanders, and this is again, you look back at those cool moments, and it was snowing over there. We were in the mountains, and we had threats that all of our equipment's going to fail, and that's where we're coming for you. And I remember we had no air cover. We had no air evac. We had nothing because they weren't flying aircraft because of the tech.
Mm-hmm.
And one of our commanders, again, cool as a cucumber, I wish I could remember his name. He said, you got nothing to worry about, troops. Just remember this. 2 things will work. Center fire cartridges, and our vehicles have carburetors. And I just, we're nervous, and it was my third tour, so I had my whiskers. I'd been there, and I had a lot of people working for me at that time who were looking up to me like that was their first tour. And I just remember that moment, and it just kind of, he was right. Fall back on your training, and we have equipment that if the bottom falls out, we got this.
Mm. Stakes were a little bit higher for your Y2K than mine at the Sears store in Timmins. But speaking of that, Daryl, obviously we're going to get to this talking about how you've been able to leverage, what you learned in the armed forces and the police, like into business now with RufDiamond. But we've talked offline, and I think we're all, like, the 3 of us are big fans of Band of Brothers. And I know that you told us you listened to the Dale Dye podcast when we had him on, and he shared his insights and, some of his experience being in the armed forces before he kind of reinvented the way Hollywood approached, war films. But as somebody who's actually jumped out of an airplane yourself, like, can you maybe talk a little bit about that? Because obviously, Steve and I would geek out over that with Band of Brothers for as long as we could have you, but we know that we have a limited amount of time, but we would be remiss if we didn't ask you to share some insights on what it's like to train to do that and then actually have that become like a regular, part of your job, where for somebody like Steve and myself, like, that seems like a thing that's just beyond anything that would be ever achievable for us. But, that was just part of what your duties were, and you trained and prepared for it.
Yeah, so I'll do like a condensed version here, and it all starts right from recruit school. When they tell you to be somewhere on time, there's a reason for it. You don't realize, why do they get all amped up about you weren't 5 minutes early? You were on time. There's a reason for that. Then when you're done your basic training, 10 weeks, I went to battle school. So that was 4 months. Now they raise the temperature, and it's, taking away sleep, taking away food, critical timings, and punishments for being late. and you have an idea, but you don't really understand what matters with timings. And I'll get to that. Or when they tell you, if your toothbrush is supposed to be facing up in your top drawer, there's a reason for that. And it's called attention to detail. And you learn about it later on your jump course. It matters. And so the idea is when you're told to do something, there's a litany of reasons, and they could fill this room full of books as to the why, but in the military, there isn't always time for the why to explain it, for things like jumping out of an aircraft or being trained to. So when you get to your jump course, and you have to be in for a couple of years, prove you've mastered your trade, because when you become a paratrooper, they understand you're leaving an aircraft. You're not in an armored vehicle where the ramp goes down and you have your section commander, your second in command, you're in a group. You could be the only one who makes it to the drop zone when you leave the aircraft, if winds are high. If you fail to meet a split-second timing, because if you do important starboard exit out of a Hercules or a C-141 Starlifter, you're going out at about 1 a second. And if you've got a 17-second drop zone, that pilot's trying to slow it down as much as he can before falling out of the sky, but he's also losing weight, because you're losing, your average paratrooper plus all your rucksack and your rifle on your shoulder and everything, you start to get very heavy, 600-700 pounds a second leaving the aircraft. So there's a lot of math involved, and that's why it's weeks and weeks and weeks of training for the course. It's not like civilian skydiving, and not to take away from that, but it's just very, very different. Mm-hmm. And if you're a half second late or a little bit slow on the exit, the person behind you, it's amplified. They may be into the power lines, into the trees, blown off into a river, because the aircraft can't slow down anymore. So once that green light is on, you're out of that plane, and the next person, there can't be any hesitation. So that's the timings, the critical component of when that comes on. You have to be flash to bangs now. And I remember something as simple as when we were loading our kits, and there's a thing that when you're loading your gear, and it's when you're at 200 feet coming out of the aircraft, you're coming down, you're under canopy, all is good. You look around, there's no one below you. You have 2 thumbs, and you release your rucksack. It drops about 15 feet on a cord, and it's hanging below you, so it hits the ground a split second before you do. Well, what holds that cord in place is something called a retainer band. It's a retainer band. It looks, it smells, it feels, it pulls exactly like something we use. It's in our kitchen drawers, an elastic. But the punishment for calling a retainer band an elastic when you're loading your gear, if you say, "Hey, Mike, can you pass me an elastic?" The punishment is severe. You're borderline removed from the course. And the reason for that is there was a jump one time, and the jumper went out of the aircraft, and he didn't have a strong exit. He kind of came backwards. He was butt down, feet up, and his hands came forward and hit those 2 release buttons, and his rucksack went into his chute. Part of that was because he didn't have a retainer band. He used an elastic. Uh-oh. It's set for a certain tensile. It's engineered. So when they tell you this or that, or you turn your feet at a 30-degree angle, it's not 31, it's not 29. Mm-hmm. It's this for a reason.
Is it like, my very simple question about that, because that's an incredible attention to detail lesson that you learn from that. What the hell is it like the first time you jump out of a plane that's going, a perfectly good airplane that you jump out of?
Yeah, well, they do it really well. So they build you up with your training, and then they bring you to when you pass all of your mock towers. So you jump at 34 feet, height of fear. You do it so many times to show you have good exit. Then they bring you to the parachute packing school, and you watch them pack, and they are robustly deliberate, focused. Like they're packing a chute, one person is watching. When they're done packing, the one person walks forward, signs the tag, the person who packed it signs the tag. That person doesn't turn around. They hold on to a railing and walk back, keeping eyes on the chute. It's put off to the side, and periodically they have to jump it. So it builds your confidence, And what they've been instilling you on the course is right back to World War II. There's signs all over the place, and there's the airborne creed, and there's things like the last easy day was yesterday, and like the airborne brotherhood. You're about to step into the van of battle. You're with the best of the best of the best, and you're young and you're fit, and you're tracking towards that. So when you're in that aircraft, your first jump, we call it a naked jump, because you're just wearing your uniform and your chute, main and reserve. And door opens, and you're pretty pumped up, and you bravado there, but we're all scared to death. I was scared every single jump. It's just.
Danny, do you remember the first, like exactly the first one?
Yeah. Because I remember as I was getting closer to the door, and I was port side, I threw my snap fastener fully aft, jump master grabs it, and I just squared off. Become a drill, like just doing it. And the prop blast, it was actually my first 2 jumps were with an American Starlifter. They were up in Canadian Forces Base Edmonton, and the jet wash was just pushing you back into the aircraft, and it's hot on the face, but you're trained to be aggressive and clear the aircraft because you don't want to hit it on the way out. So squared off, did that, and then it becomes eerily silent. And you're looking around and you see an aircraft just going away from you. And there's still people spilling out of it. And I got to do my drills, and you wake up for a split second, and then you're under canopy, and it's very surreal. You don't feel like you're falling until you get a little closer to the fields, and then it starts to come fast, and you do your proper landing, and you're pick up your chute, back out, load up, doing it again. And every jump for 4 days is progressively more equipment, and then they do your night jumps, and then you jump onto your graduation.
Wow, that's great. I could talk about that stuff for hours. Just shifting gears a little bit. So you sort of alluded to it, in those mentors you had, and you start to learn, strategic mission analysis, operational planning, those kinds of things. So maybe it isn't so unlikely that you go from learning and seeing those mentors to the business world. So can you talk about how some of those things you learned in service that, have now translated to what you're doing now?
Yeah. So I see so many parallels, and I'm very thankful for the leaders I learned under their tutelage and the courses I was sent on. And I was assessed on small party taskings, and something as simple as, I remember one of my tasks when I was on my 12-week leadership course, and it was one of my tasks was they needed, I think, 6 or 10 chairs brought from one room to another room. Simple enough. So my instructor says, this is what I need done. Any questions? I said, no. So my instructor took 2 steps away, turned around, and he says, why isn't it done? And I said, what? And he says, just so you know, you've been found ineffective for the following reasons. And I'll never forget that. You have been found ineffective for the following reasons. And he says, you did not clarify when the task had to be completed.
Interesting.
He said, walk with me. So I'm almost surreally losing my hearing, thinking, what just happened? We walk over, the door was locked where the chairs were supposed to go. He goes, did you ask that question? Did you ask any questions? And we went through about 10 things to understand. And this was all building up for later on when it was 2 o'clock in the morning and we're about to set up an L ambush on a crossroads. And I have to go by helicopter from point A to point B, and then I have to lead people. There might be a mission shift, and 100 things are going to change. Radios are going to fail, communications. Did I leave a 5-point contingency plan with the group that I just walked away from? Do they know what to do if I don't return? Can they carry on with the mission? Did I pass on to a second in command? All those things. And it's all that training where when I went to do the second one, and it was a very similar task, I think it was to set up a tent in this area, a military tent. And I stopped, I said, yes, I have questions. Where does the tent have to be? Do I have any assistance or any issues concerning? what I have to do. Is there any safety concerns? Is there a certain way the tent has to be facing? And he had an answer for every single question. Because the test wasn't about setting up a tent. That's not what it was. It was to start thinking and think your way through what you've been told. Because there are times in the military that someone will look at you, tell you something, and they'll say, do you understand? And a lot of people in the military have heard the word hua. And what it means to hear you, I understand you, acknowledge back. So sometimes when an instructor or a sergeant or supervisor is speaking, a soldier might respond with hua, hua, and they continue the conversation. And it's all of that. The genesis of setting up those chairs led to farther down the road, and which led me in business to think my way through that and to ask questions when could be critical decision making. And this is what I say to the people around me. I say, what do we know? When do we know it? What do we know? When did we know it? Are we we are at the bottom of the curve here for reacting? Are we responding appropriately? And, like I said, there's so many parallels with the military, especially when it comes to leadership, because number one, the first leadership principle, achieve professional competence. You don't have to be an expert in everything, but you have to be competent in the sphere you're dealing with. For example, the one piece of equipment that I worked to design was to make shotcrete remotely for mining. And I've never made shotcrete before. Never. But I immersed myself in understanding it. And now I'm competent in it. So I can ask relevant questions, because anybody can ask questions, but I could ask relevant questions. And when I hear a brief back, I can then process the data because I achieve professional competence. I'm not a subject matter expert in shotcrete by any reason, but I know I have shotcrete experts around me, but I have achieved professional competence. Mm-hmm. And another big one with me is, again, the military principle is to know your people and promote their welfare. So to understand is that Sally who's got 2 twin children that are 6 months old at home, and she's coming to work and she looks a little tired and there's lots going on at home. Am I alert to when I ask her how she's doing? Am I really looking and listening? Am I paying attention to her kinesics? Is she just giving me the standard, oh, I'm good, I'm fine? Because a good supervisor, I always say, supervisors need to have good supervision. Mm-hmm. And supervision to me, I don't know if I've ever told you guys this, is 2 words. As a supervisor, you need to have supervision.
Yeah.
So I need to be alert with Sally and Jason over there, who I think last night maybe one of his buddies was having a stag. So is he coming in? Is he fit? Is he good for work? Is he fit for duty? Where is he at? Do I want to maybe sit in the office for a couple of hours, or is he okay operating that heavy piece of machinery? And it's knowing what's going on in people's worlds a little bit as a supervisor, being alert to them and caring about their needs, and truly, finding out what makes people tick. Is it time off that matters to them? Is it bonus? Is it appreciation in the workplace? Is it courses through the company? And because everybody has different wants and needs, and it changes. It's never 5 years ago you said you were happy just with some bonus pay. I don't see here you wanted a promotion. A good supervisor stays in tune, right? And a big thing for me as well is to develop the leadership potential of those who work for me. Yeah. Because I always want someone, I want to train somebody or pass on knowledge for, that person can replace me. And that's okay. Some people get real jumpy about that. But to me, I was taught in the military, first thing you do when you're given a task is you appoint a second in command. you immediately point a second in command, because if you turn and walk away, an instructor takes you aside and says, something just happened to you. You can't speak, you can't talk, you can't do anything. Let's see what Steve or Mike does now. Did you brief them? Do they have a general understanding of what has to be done? And I find with RufDiamond, the people that I come in contact with daily through our company, they can keep the boat afloat without me being there. I can go on holidays and I'm not getting a phone call every 15 minutes. Are we allowed to do this? Can I do that?
Mm-hmm.
No, I've already set that in motion months before, and I'm there to promote their welfare. Know your people, promote their welfare. So they know that I'm not going to come back and pounding the desk. What do you mean you bought these pens? Who authorized the purchase of those pens? That should have went through me.
Yeah.
So they understand their boundaries.
Yeah.
And they're supported.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a mark of a good manager and good supervisor and a good team when you're able to do that. Steve and I actually we shared a similar boss previously, not at the same time, but one of his mantras, which I don't think necessarily made a ton of sense, but it's same principle. He always used to say to us, eliminate my job, which I think what he meant was, I want to put you in a position so that at some point we don't eliminate the job, but you take my job and you go on and you move on, or you at least take my teachings and move on somewhere else. So, I mean, I think that's a big part of it as well, because when it comes down to it, it's people. You're managing people. And so obviously we know what the tasks are and it differs from company to company, but at the end of the day, if you're not taking care of those people or managing those people, whether it's applied research or vehicle platforms, you're not going to go far. So to kind of transition or change gears, although Steve already used that, it's maybe too apropos now, but we want to talk about RufDiamond, and we know that from your service, you had experience with amphibious off-road vehicles, and certainly with the tactical unit here in Sudbury, you would have had experience with different kinds of vehicles. So was it a natural offshoot to take that experience you already had to start RufDiamond, or is there actually a different story there that you would tell about how you went from from where you were to with RufDiamond now?
Yeah, I never saw it because I was climbing through the ranks in the police department. I was on my way to next level, and because of the military. And then Felix, I came in contact with Felix Lopes, and I give the guy credit because I define him as one of those people who he sees sooner and scans wider. He just sees whether it's a day, a week, a month before somebody else, and he doesn't have tunnel vision. He's looking very wide and what's happening around, cause and effect. Something could be happening in Europe, and he's looking at a linkage over here, and very, very good. But he was very keen on me getting into business. I said, I'm not a business person at all. He goes, oh, but you are. And I thought, well, no, I don't think so, but thank you. And they continued on, and a couple dinners later, more meetings. And I said, okay, I'll do it on my days off. We'll see. Mm-hmm. And I kind of liked it. And I saw where I was able to affect change a little faster. And so with we ended up going with a FatTruck made out of Quebec, and we did a trip to Quebec, saw the machine. And when we first saw it, the factory was empty. We just saw a prototype unit. But we looked, we listened, we liked what we saw, and we signed on to be a dealer for Ontario, which is now expanded to Manitoba and Nunavut. And I've introduced the Canadian Forces to the FatTruck in January. So seeing the FatTruck and the relationship, again, those relationships, and working with Zeal Motor with the FatTruck, I took what I knew from all of the half track, half wheel, full track, full wheel, amphibious vehicles, partial this, snow machines, heavy duty this, and I applied that for RufDiamond, and also assisted to help pass on positive info to Zeal Motor to help them grow their company.
Yeah, I find that so interesting. And, rugged, amphibious, in the middle of nowhere. My dad was he got his mechanic training through the Canadian Armed Forces. And, when you're in the middle of nowhere trying to fix something with only what you brought, you get really you really want to then influence the design of how that should be made so it doesn't break. And then he was also a mechanic at the logging company, which is even worse. You're in the middle of the bush, trying to fix a skidder. It's kind of the worst scenario. But this FatTruck platform, like, to look at it, you think it's a toy almost, right? Like it's a toy that's been blown up, but it has such like uniqueness. There's nothing really else in its class that it can be compared to. It's not, it's not an Argo. It's not a 4x4 pickup truck. Like maybe I'll just for a second, if you could just tell us a bit about that FatTruck, and I'd love to. We might not have time today, but understand what it was like to sell that back to the Canadian Armed Forces now, because you guys must have had lots of points of connection on when you're talking, and they probably were picking up what you're putting down, right?
Yeah, yeah. So FatTruck, it's basically, if you could imagine a large tired vehicle, it looks a lot heavier than it is. It's like an overblown Tonka truck, and centralized tire inflation based on whatever tire pressure you want. You want snow, mud, trail, or water, and touch of a button, it changes it. Swamps, marsh, muskeg, you can swim with 1,000 kgs on board. So they have two platforms like that. It's a pickup truck as well as a wagon for a people mover. And what I'm ultra excited about was what landed February 23rd, and that's the 8x8. So it's an articulating unit, and that thing is next level. I drove it in January. I brought the military to take a look at it before we launched it. I had a bit of fun with them, and I said, "Hey, can I trust you guys with a secret?" And they were all from Canadian Special Operations Force Command, and we had a good laugh because
Yeah.
and it was just they were couldn't believe it, could not believe it, and the comfort and safety built into it. And what a lot of people don't really think about is how comfortable it is rolling over a 30 centimeter, 40 centimeter boulder, stumps. It just rolls right over it comfortably, and it doesn't transfer that energy to the operator inside. It could be extremely tired, exhausted from a mission task.
Before we jumped on, we were talking about PDAC, the Prospectors and Developers Association of Canada show, and I would wonder if you'd just tell us a bit about how that FatTruck is sort of positioned for the sort of remote mining and exploration sector, and then just some of the feedback you got at PDAC, because I'm sure you were pretty busy there.
Yeah, so we sold multiple units on the show. Just people could not believe the capabilities of it. They saw the videos. We had an emergency request from a mining company on day 2 while we were there, because they heard about it and contacted me while I was at the show. It was strategically perfect where we were. People could walk around, see it, sit in it, have an immersive experience. Because you can see something on your computer screen and it's fine, but what's truly final is sitting in it and understanding it. And the next best thing would be a demo ride. But the exploration community is just so impressed with its payload, because what their wants is they want to be able to bring out fuel and steel to their drilling rigs with a crew and then come back with core samples. And that's very hard for them, and it's challenging, especially when the weather turns and they were using helicopters, because the FatTruck doesn't care if it's snowing, windy, raining, lightning, dark, windy. It doesn't matter. It does not matter. It's deploying, and that's what it's designed for. And they really like that, because they also have a safety vehicle on site, because there's some places they have to stop drilling if that helicopter can't fly that's sitting there. Because
if someone gets hurt, they can't extricate them.
That's right. So where's the FatTruck, off we go. But the real takeaway, I was really, really surprised. I received a call 2 days ago from the minister's office, Greg Rickford, and he's coming here to RufDiamond April 3rd, and because he really liked the FatTruck, and so he wants to come for a demo ride.
There you go.
So so he's coming out April 3rd, and what he sees and what Minister Patty Haju noticed was, for our remote First Nations communities, they have that, we call it the shoulder season, where you can't put the transports on the ice roads. and early. And then when they have to come off, the FatTruck can get on a month earlier and stay on a month later. And now with the 8x8 with its 2,500 kg payload, plus it can tow a trailer, that really opens up the north for them. So there's mine exploration, there's helping out our First Nations communities, and we want to work with them. We want to work with them to help them solve that pressure problem of time, because we can't control the weather. But what the FatTruck can do is it can control your safety.
Yeah, no, there's definitely a lot of applicability in a range of sectors, especially you know, in the north as well. And Daryl, we'd love to talk to you more about that, and we've already taken up more time than you offered. But I'm going to take one more liberty, because you shared this offline before we started recording, and it's too good not to share again. Because right now I'm training for the Sudbury Rocks race that's happening in May, and I'm only doing the 10K this year. I had done a half marathon in the first season of COVID, so I've got to get back to that at some point, but I haven't been running enough to reasonably do a half marathon. But you talked about the Nijmegen March that you've done previously, and if you could talk a little bit about that, because I think it kind of makes my 10K race you know, pale in comparison to 50K a day for 4 days with full gear and pack.
Yeah, so the Nijmegen March has been going on for 80 plus years. It's held in Nijmegen, Holland, and every year 40,000+ participants attend it, and they do everything from, I think, 10K up to 21K. But the military, and it's all on their website, but the military, they do, you have to wear combat boots, combat pants, your unit shirt, and a beret that you're allowed to take off if it gets really hot. And you have a backpack, and it has to have a 30-pound plate of steel on it. And you do 50 kilometers a day per day, 50K per day, 4 days in a row. And you start, I know it sounds remarkable.
Yes.
I still shake my head. How did I, or why did I do it? But the Canadian military, they start, and you have to do 750 kilometers of training before you do it. It's very measured, very pragmatic. And we started off doing a 4.5 kilometer march, and then a 5, and then a 5.5, then back to a 4. And they have a schedule. It's all online to build you up, to toughen your feet, get you used to walking that distance, to get your knees, hips, elbows, back, shoulders ready for that. Because you can appreciate, you have, I think there's 5,000 or 6,000 soldiers or military personnel that participate of the 40,000. And it is just incredible. It's very, very proud to be there, a proud moment, because you're representing Canada. And at the end of the 4 days, Canada has 16 10-person teams, and we lead the march in to get the Nijmegen medal. And Canada, we have a very, very close relationship, obviously, from World War II with the Dutch. And you're presented with your Nijmegen medal. And it's a night of festivities. But you could appreciate every night is a night of festivities. When you finish your 50K, you're not going to bed. You're not in a hotel. You're sleeping on a cot.
Yeah.
And but we trained, and you know the old adage, right? The more you sweat in peace, the less you bleed in war.
Yeah.
And we trained and smartly and learned how to hydrate, listen to your body, and slowly build it up and put your ego aside. And if you think you can do 20K today, you don't have to. Maybe go 15. Go. You don't always have to be follow a schedule. Be smart and listen to your body.
You know what? That almost made me emotional. My my grandmother was a Dutch war bride, and my grandfather was in World War II, and then that's where they met, was in Holland. So I mean that special relationship between Canada and the Netherlands, you know, that really hits home for me. But what a way to end the podcast. Thank you so much, Daryl Adams, for taking time. I'm sure Mike and I will see you around. We sort of swim in the same circles here in the mining community. But really, really thank you for sharing your time and your story. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
3 miles up, 3 miles down. Steve, what is your
Currahee.
response? There you go.
We shall run Currahee. Yeah, no, I think gosh, I've forgotten the name now of the Dutch town he was talking about, but like that seems like an incredible thing to do. What a great story.
Yeah, that's like an insane amount of miles and kilometers to log in 4 days. That would be like basically like walking from here like past Parry Sound. in terms of if you're doing like 50 clicks a day, right? So like if you want to put it into perspective.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I had not heard about the Nijmegen March. I obviously have already talked about Currahee, but I will say this because I didn't get to talk about it in the episode with Daryl because we were already tight on time. But like that's one of the things where I don't have like a lot of things on my bucket list where I'm like, I have to do this or I have to go there. But like, you know that I'm obviously a big fan of Band of Brothers, and you know that I like to run. So like one of the things that I do have on my list, and I've talked to Chantel about, is that at some point I'm going to go to Toccoa, Georgia, and they have an annual race where you can do the 3 miles up, 3 miles down at Currahee. And so like I don't know when I'm going to do it. I'm obviously not doing it this summer because I think it happens every June, probably to coincide with D-Day, which would make sense. But I think at some point, like it's on my list. I just have to do it because I don't know how many times I've seen them do that run on the show.
I know.
That would be pretty awesome to actually be able to do that in real life.
I'm almost due for a rewatch. Actually, I just realized I might have to hit a rewatch soon. Maybe around D-Day I'll throw it back on again. My wife and I are supposed to go. I have family in Holland. I think I mentioned on the pod
I've
before.
never heard that before.
I would love to go visit them, and of course, go to Nijmegen. I don't know where that is in Holland. I have to look it up. But the good thing is, it's a very small country. I'm sure we can make a stop there.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll find your way. When are
Yeah.
you guys doing that?
Well, we wanted
in
to
the
do
works?
well, we wanted to do it this summer, but I don't think we'll have time. We're supposed to be doing a kitchen renovation. Don't want to commit myself to that on air in case she's listening, but she's not listening.
She's not listening.
She's not listening. She's not listening. But it obviously summer or fall is when I'd like to go. So probably next summer at this rate.
Yeah. Well, there you
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
Do they make a
Thanks.
size 13 clog for you or what?
I have size 12 feet. And
Yeah, but
growing
wouldn't
up,
you, don't they have to be bigger because they're made out of
course.
wood? So like,
yeah.
not a lot of flexibility.
People don't wear those as just, a shoe to wear. They're incredibly uncomfortable. I had a pair when I was younger that my grandmother bought me on one of our trips back there. And it seems maniacal to make someone wear those. The wooden
Yeah,
shoe.
I don't. You definitely.
I think we've progressed past the wooden shoe.
Yeah, Daryl talked about that. One of the grannies that he ran across in that march. I'm sure she was not wearing wooden clogs, but maybe she was, because maybe she's that hardcore. We don't know.
Could be. They're pretty hardcore people. I had a friend
Yeah.
that always used to bother my grandmother. They said, that's why you guys got invaded. You can't sneak up on anyone in those wooden shoes.
Oh, ooh, that's too soon, and it's been like 80 years. So,
Yeah.
but anyway, any other takeaways that you want to share with Daryl, rather than just you and I could talk about clogs for hours? But
Well, I think next time we see Daryl, we should probably go for a ride in a FatTruck. I haven't been in one yet. It would be awesome to pilot one around.
yeah, well, we know that our wives aren't listening, but we're assuming that Daryl is at least listening, or at least he listened to his part. He's probably tuned out now. But yes, we haven't done that yet. We have to experience a FatTruck ride. Not to say that we're on the same level as Minister Greg Rickford, but if there's ever an opportunity, I think that would make for we should have done the podcast in the FatTruck.
Yeah.
I don't know how logistically, but anyway.
Well, and I hope no one would make fun of us if they do see us in the FatTruck, because of course that would be fat shaming.
No, and I think that's it. I don't know how we can recover. So that's it for the Unlikely Innovators this week. Thanks to Daryl Adams for joining us. Great to hear about his journey in the armed forces through police services and now what he's doing with RufDiamond. Thank you for lasting as long as you have with us this week, and we'll be back with some more content and some interesting guests next week.
The Unlikely Innovators with Mike Commito and Steve Gravel, presented by Cambrian R&D and the Center for Smart Mining.